spending a little bit of your time. I know that that's a very important thing. You know, time is more important than money, because if you spend your money, you can always go make some more. But once you spend your time, it's gone forever. So I want to thank you very much for spending a little of your time with us. I'd like to thank Linda for having me come up to this beautiful part of the world. I haven't been to Big Bear in many, many, many years. I was trying to remember when it was. And, you know, probably in the 60s, the late 50s, early 60s. I think probably the late 50s, in my Boy Scout days. We were wandering up and down the Sierras at every opportunity. So anyway, as you heard, my name is John Miller. That's me up there. In case some impersonator shows up, you can see that it's true. I have been with this company for a long time. I joined in 1968. Short time, I was, before that, I was an electronics technician at NASA Ames Research Center. There in Moffet Field, California, working on the guidance control systems for the Apollo Moon project, amongst other things. And as you know, we got to the moon and got back. So as a reward, I was drafted into the Army. Spent a little time in the military, got back out, went to school, changed career paths, decided to get into more the manufacturing side of things that were aimed at people, not at the moon. So since that time, I've been very much involved in everything that goes on in the product side of the business. In the late 1970s, I joined with Dr. Arthur First in the formation of our scientific advisory board to the company. And over all of those years, my sort of knowledge of and belief in the importance of the messaging you're going to hear today began to grow in me, to the point where this became what I wanted to do, was to talk to people and share information with them, to empower them, to give knowledge. There's a tremendous amount of knowledge in the world, but I don't think much of it gets delivered in a fashion that we can actually apply to our lives. And what I want to do today is to try to do that, to try to just give you some information that will help you and help all of those that are around you, maximizing your potential for long-term health and vitality while minimizing your risk of disease, which is something we should all practice every day in our lives. Okay? So, very, very important. Three things I want to do. I'm going to empower you by talking about a crisis that's going on worldwide and why it applies to all of us, even though most of us will say that happens to somebody else, isn't going to happen to me. Okay, but it's happening to all of us eventually. Then I want to talk about why nutrition is your single most powerful personal tool that you can wield in protecting yourself from disease and maximizing your potential for health. And finally, I'll take you on a little tour of how the company selects raw materials, the differences we go to make sure that our products fulfill very strict criteria that we have for ourselves. Okay? So let's start here. First of all, you know there's an epidemic going on in the world. Everybody's aware that there's an epidemic in the world? Okay, and the epidemic is chronic disease, heart disease, cancer, and so on. Even though we're getting better medically at treating those things, catching them and treating them, the occurrence in the population continues to grow at an alarming rate. So we are dealing with, the medical community deals with the symptoms of it, and they're quite good at dealing with the symptoms. But the rest of us have to deal with the cause, and it's the cause that isn't getting addressed, and we're going to talk about that a bit today. Okay, but there's an epidemic. Any of you follow my Facebook posts? No? Okay. Yes? Okay, good. I posted one the other day that I thought was a very good example, and it talks about the occurrence of just diabetes in the population worldwide. And I like numbers because I think numbers give you a sense of proportion. So it said that back in 1980, there were about 106 million people in the world diagnosed with diabetes. Okay, that was in 1980. Here we are as of 2014, though. That number had grown to be about 420 million people with a firm diagnosis of diabetes. Almost a 400% increase in just that 24-year period of time. So what defines an epidemic is when the occurrence of a disease rapidly outpaces the growth of the population. Well, the population growth in that same 24 years around the world wasn't anything like 400% or even 100% or even 25%. It was something less than that, like 23 point something, they tell me. So if you look at the trend line there, the trend line is that the occurrence of diabetes in the population is rapidly outpacing the population growth itself, which means that the disease is now considered epidemic, as are these others. The World Health Organization and others put that together. Now, we don't think that this happens to us, but here's some stuff from the United States. It says, oh, it isn't going to show up on that screen, but it says here, as you can see, it says the chronic disease is a leading cause of death and disability in the United States. Okay, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, I can buy into that. But look at that next one down there, that first arrow. It says as of 2012, about half of all adults, or 117 million people, had one or more chronic conditions. So that's not supposed to happen. When we're adults, we're supposed to be at our best, right? We're supposed to be in command of ourselves. We've made it through the minefield of childhood and adolescence, right? Survived puberty, got into adulthood. Now we're here. Yet in adults, 117 million of them have one or more chronic conditions. If you think about that, of the 318 or 19 million people here, that's a big chunk. The adults will make up, the adults in the bigger sense will make up about 250 million of that. So almost half of the adult population has one or more chronic diseases. So whether you think it happens to you or not, it might not happen to you right now, but the reality is it's happening to half of the adult people that you run into essentially have one or more chronic conditions. And then 7 of the top 10 causes of death in 2010 were chronic diseases. Okay. Here's another thing to consider, though. When you think of the costs of healthcare these days, it's a big driver, is chronic disease. It says 86% of all healthcare spending in 2010, this is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 86% of all healthcare spending was on people with one or more chronic conditions. Well, that would be 86% on the 117 million adults. So that doesn't count all the other diseases that are going on there. And if you look at the cost of that, in 2010, heart disease cost us about $315 billion. In 2012, these are annual estimates, right? 2012, diabetes was 245, cancer was 157, and diseases linked to obesity was 147 million. Those are annual costs. So if you add them all up, it adds up to about $865 billion a year. That's B with a billion. Did I say M with a million earlier? It's B with a billion. That's a lot of money, okay? It's a lot of money. And if you think of the cost of healthcare, and you take it this way, there's as of 2014, 318.9 million people in this country. So if you take 865 billion and divide it by 318.9 million, what do you get?
You tell us.
You get $2,711.59. Okay, that means for every person in this country, from the newest child that was just born in the closest hospital to the oldest centenarian, every one of us is spending $2,711.59 a year, whether we know it or not. It's coming out of your health care costs, whatever your premium charges are, whatever your health care insurance reality is, coming out of there someplace. If you're on Medicare, it's coming out of there. But for a family of 4, that means it's almost $12,000 a year, or almost $1,000 a month. That's just being consumed by that small group of chronic diseases. That doesn't include Alzheimer's and all of these other diseases out there. So the actual cost to our economy, to the vitality of our country, is huge. And one of the problems is, luckily, we have got a lot of financial might, but around the world, this is just U.S. numbers, but around the world, a lot of countries are confronted with the idea that they will face bankruptcy trying to take care of all of the people in their country that are going into this chronic disease epidemic, falling prey to the epidemic. Okay. So, and it isn't going to get any better. Here's a trend line. This is from the Rand Corporation. It was funded by the National Institute of Health back in 2000. This is the trend line for chronic disease. In the United States, it starts back here in 1995. You can see there was about 118 million people involved in chronic disease somewhere, one or more chronic diseases. And if you go on up the line here, you can see that today we're at about 150 million, and the line continues out where it's projected to go to 171 million. So it's easy to see how that 865 billion could become $1 trillion. And the pharmacies and everybody that's involved in all of that are going to want more money. So maybe it's $1.25 trillion or $1.25 trillion. Okay. That's why our elected representatives who keep telling us about the cost of health care being an issue and so on and so forth, and their inability to deal with it are so alarmed, because the trend lines tell us that we're in big trouble. Okay. And it's not just that. Here, take a look at this one. This is the trend line for diabetes in the United States. Okay. Back here in 1960, there were about 1.8 million people with diabetes in the United States. By the time we get up to 2015, where we are today, there's about 18 million people. So it went up about 1,000% in that period between 60 and 2015, about a 55-year period. It went up 1,000%. Okay, and you can see the trend line continues on out there to 2050. There'll be a lot more people. So the reality is that this is a thing that's just going to blow up on us. It has the capacity to just drain the resources and wealth of the nation and challenge us as a culture and a people to be able to maintain this. Because if all these people get sick, what are we going to do? We're going to take care of them, right? We're going to take care of them. And that means we got to find the money someplace. And the money's going to be difficult to find. So what do you do in these sorts of things? Well, the reality is that it all starts with us. The government can't solve this for us. It's much too big for the government to solve, and frankly, I don't want them involved in my personal biochemistry. I just can't understand, have an IRS mentality, figuring out what you're going to eat. That doesn't make sense to me. So, but they can't anyway, and nor should they. The responsibility rests with each and every one of us individually. If this is going to change, it has to change with each and every one of us first, grassroots. And that's what we need to do. We need to end this trend. We need to figure out a way to stop this. Because if we don't, we're going to be in really, really big trouble personally, from our health-wise, but culturally from what America stands for, what we've been and what we will be in the future. So we have to figure out a way to end the trend. And the way that is it starts with you. Okay? It starts with you making decisions to change what's going on. And by you starting, and then you help other people start, and then if enough people begin to take personal responsibility for this, only then can we end the trend. Only then will those trend lines change from going up to leveling off and hopefully going back down. The situation is terrible. I mean, it's absolutely terrible, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to be a real problem. But the thing is, we know exactly what to do. Okay? It's not like this is a surprise. These organizations, and essentially every organization in the world, but American Heart Association, World Health, Centers for Disease Control, every one of these associations and many more say this is the answer. The answer is not complicated. It isn't rocket science. It's not like you have to do anything difficult. It's these three things. Manage your weight and be physically active. Those two are closely related because if you're managing your weight, you're more likely to be physically active, and if you're physically active, you're more likely to manage your weight. But most importantly, they say do this. Eat a diet rich in whole food nutrients found in whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, and fish. Every one of them say that. Every one of them have the same guidelines. They have it in a different phrasing of the words, but essentially exactly the same guidelines. And the reason is that they know it's the absence of these things in our food supply and the abundance of the things that we eat in their place that are the drivers of chronic disease. I mean, we've known that for a long, long time. This is not, like I say, rocket science. It's really pretty simple. Garbage in, garbage out. You feed your body garbage, you're going to get garbage back. Okay? If you take care of your body and manage it like it is, an important living system, then we can get that done. So every one of them wants us to do that, and the reason is that our bodies are physically dependent upon the presence of these things being in our food supply. Forever, prior to maybe 1950, prior to World War II, forever an abundance of these has been what's been in the food supply, and but since that time, the food supply has changed where we just don't get enough. They don't want us to eat a bunch, but they want us to eat a significant amount. Guidelines for whole grain consumption is they want you to eat 5 to 7 servings of whole grains every day. Anybody have any whole grain today? Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. Okay, good for you. If you didn't, then I did. I had my hand up. If you didn't, then you compromised your body's ability to be as healthy as it could be, because it relies on whole grains for a lot of things. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Did any of you guys get on the grain train up here, though? You didn't hear about it. We'll talk about it later. They want you to eat 5 to 13 servings of colorful fruits and vegetables. Those are the carrots and tomatoes and spinach. They leave out things like potatoes, the most commonly consumed vegetable in this country, and bananas, the most commonly consumed fruit, because though they have a lot of carbohydrate value and things, and maybe a little fiber, beyond that they have no nutritional value. But what they want you to eat are the brightly colored things that you see when you go into the produce stand or wherever, the carrots and tomatoes, red bell peppers and the like. And they want you to eat omega-3 rich fish. And they want you to try to do that every day. But most people don't even come close. Here's an example, some data again of what's going on in this country. Fruit and vegetable consumption. What you want to get to is 5. 5 is not the finish line, by the way, that's the starting line. Yeah. That's where you want to get to start. You can notice anything below that is considered a failure. So for fruit and vegetable intake, kids 2 to 6 and some adults, and this is from the USDA, kids 2 to 6, some women and older adults want to get to that 5. 5's the starting point. If you happen to be an older kid, a teen girl, an active woman, and most men, then you want to try to get to 7. And if you're a teen boy or active man, then you want to try to get up to 9. And if you're like an athlete or somebody that's involved in a really physically demanding job, then those numbers go up to 10 or 12, or like I say, as high as 15, or as high as 13 rather. So how are we doing? We're not doing really very good at this. Again, an indicator of the driver of the problem. You can see, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2013, the average adult consumption was only 2.7 servings per day, 1.1 serving of fruit and 1.6 servings of vegetables. That's not really very much. The thing you have to remember about these numbers, though, is this is an average. So on one end of the scale, you've got people like me who consume a lot of fruits and vegetables, and all the vegans and vegetarians and so on. And on the other end of the scale, you've got people who get 0. On any given day, 40% of the adult population in this country gets 0 fruit and or 0 vegetable, primarily because they don't serve them in fast food restaurants, okay, which is where a big portion of the population get their food every day. And the adolescent thing is worse, right? Adolescents would be in the higher group here, and they only get about 2.3. Again, in any given day in this country, more than half of our children go without any fruit or any vegetable in their diets. Okay. And the reason for that is they don't sell that stuff at 7-Eleven. Which is where they go after school, right? They leave school, they go down to 7-Eleven, they get a bag of these puffy orange disasters and a caffeinated, hyper-caffeinated energy drink. That's what's the first thing you see when you come through the door. So, there's a problem, right? No wonder we have these situations occur. Here's the omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3s are critical to your health. The omega-3s are the anti-inflammatory side of your body's biochemistry. Okay. There should be, for every omega-3 molecule, there should be about 3, every anti-inflammatory, there should be about 3 inflammatories. In reality these days in this country, for every anti-inflammatory, there are something like 20 to 40 inflammatory fats in your body. So they make for really big problems. We live in an inflammatory state. This is data from the American Heart Association. They say for heart health, that's just keeping your heart healthy, normal heart health. And not for people who are worried about heart health, but just in general. They say you should consume 2 servings of omega-3 rich fish every week. That would give you about 2 grams of omega-3. So a 5-ounce serving of salmon, for example, gives you about 1 gram of omega-3 fatty acids. It's got a lot of other good things in salmon, like protein and the like, but you'll get 1 gram of omega-3 fatty acids. So if you ate salmon twice a week, you would get to this minimum threshold for heart health they're talking about. However, if you're concerned about heart disease, if it's in your family or your doctor has said, oh, you're at risk because of cholesterol, triglycerides, whatever it is, or you just want to maximize your health protection for your heart, then you want to get up to 1 gram daily, which would be equivalent to eating a 5-ounce serving of salmon every day. Okay. Which, anybody have any salmon today? I had some yesterday. I didn't have any for breakfast.
I hate salmon.
Good. You what?
I hate salmon. So I definitely have not had it in the last 20 years.
Salmon loves you, though. Anyway, Should try to get a gram a day. And for high cholesterol, American Heart Association says 1 to 2 grams a day. That would mean they want you to have salmon for breakfast and for dinner. So now you can have tuna. I don't know how you feel about tuna or sardines or any of these omega-3 rich fish. But I use salmon as an example because it's something people usually like. So we're not doing really very well here. The average consumption of all types of fish in the United States is just 1 serving a week. That includes things like tilapia, which have essentially no omega-3s, okay, because they're raised in fresh water. So fresh, warm water fish, catfish, things like that have little or no omega-3s. You want those deep, cold ocean water fish like salmon and tuna and mackerel and sardines and those. That's where you find the omega-3s because what they eat produces that. And we began to go on, you know, things like hamburger stands in the 1950s were starting to rise, and fast food was a sort of a thing, but as we industrialized our lifestyles more and more, these things started popping up everywhere. And if you plot the occurrence of fast food establishments in the human population in this country, then you plot the occurrences of those diseases we talked about, the trend lines match almost identically. Almost identically. And that happens true all over the world. So the industrialization of the food supply. So the USDA got really alarmed because this stuff had disappeared and it's fundamental to our biochemistry. So they said, let's get everybody on the grain train. So they started this thing called Get on the Grain Train. They wanted to eat 5 servings of whole grain a day, right? So they started working with the industry and so on, and the industry said, good, okay, we're going to do a lot of whole grain. But USDA, we can't actually do whole grain because it has such a short shelf life. So they arrived at a thing where they said, okay, well, we'll find something that will allow you to say whole grain, but actually really won't be whole grain. It's part of the food monster in this country. So they worked with the USDA, and they came up with this thing that would allow us to make a whole grain Count Chocula. Okay, did you notice that says, you know, whole grain? All of these whole grain products turned out not to have any whole grain value to them. Added fiber and things like that, but didn't work. So at the end, they started this grain train thing in 2001 with this multi-million-dollar campaign, hundreds of millions of dollars, to get us all to eat more whole grain, only to find out that by 2012 things had not gotten better, they'd actually gotten worse when they found that less than 1% of children in this country get any whole grain in their diet every day. Less than 1%, yet it's fundamental to growth and development, and less than 8% of adults. The only reason 8% of the adults do is because they're either still living out in the country where these things are natural, or they have that sort of practice. They practice a lifestyle of sustained health, or they happen to be vegan or vegetarian or whatever. The rest of us, though, what that tells you is 99% of the children you run into and 92% of the adults have a whole grain deficiency. So it's a problem. It all adds up to this. This is what's going on in our health these days. Okay? We eat far too much of that stuff on the left and far too little of the stuff on the right. And that's simple. It's exactly what when we look at all the demographics, all of the disappearing data, we track, you know, how many tons of beef and how it was consumed, and tons of flour and how it was consumed, and all of those things. We know that it goes out into the population and gets converted into one of these. It doesn't have to look like a burger, because essentially it's all the same. It's all fat and carbohydrates. And that's the sort of thing, and it becomes a real problem, and it's increasing. The trend line for the consumption of these things is increasing, not decreasing. There are not fewer fast food establishments, there are more. There are not fewer fast and convenient food offerings in the freezer section of your supermarket, there are more. Okay. The problem is that they undermine our health. This is where this product comes in. This is the product I want to tell you about today. It is a tool for you to use to help fix this imbalance. The way that each and every one of us takes on this responsibility for ourselves is to first identify the things in your diet and lifestyle that are on the negative side of that scale, that are on the fast industrialized food side of the scale, and look at those and understand what they are, and then understand what's on the positive side, what's on the good and wholesome side of the scale, and then deal with that reality. By making small changes every day, you can switch that over, and this product is designed to help you make those small changes. It's made entirely from nutrients inside the human food chain. It's made from whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and fish. That's everything that's on that list of things that the World Health Organization and everybody else says we should consume more of. Everything that's on that list of things that says because these are absent, we have this big explosion of disease. Okay. It's a very unique product. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It was formulated by this group here. This is our scientific advisory board. The founder of the SAB up here is a fellow named Dr. Arthur First, who spent most of his life actually chasing cancer, and eventually decided that rather than trying to correct it, he would go on and try to prevent it. And left Stanford University, where he had run the Stanford Cancer Research Institute for years, founded and run the Stanford Cancer Research Institute, and then started another research institute, and then in 1975 joined Neolife and put us on a path towards this idea of preventing disease through nutrition. Okay. The product is really simple to consume. It's just these 4 little elements you see here. The green capsule on the left is a whole grain concentrate called treonine. The orange, or the dark, supposed to be dark red capsule next to that is a carotenoid complex that's made from colorful fruits and vegetables. The gold capsule is salmon oil plus, made from omega-3 fatty acid rich salmon. And the last green one there is a multi. I'll take you through them real quickly. Whole grains are important for a number of reasons. One, they're fundamental to our biochemistry, but when you understand how your body works, you get an appreciation for what's involved. Each and every one of us has about 75 trillion cells in our body, and those cells are made by the formation of what we call a lipid bilayer. It's a membrane around the outside that forms around the cell. Essentially, its role is to function as a barrier to keep what's outside outside and what's inside inside. Okay, so it's a living thing unto itself. But the barrier, that membrane, is built entirely on lipids and sterols. It's a lipid bilayer that is based only on what you give your body. It can only make these cell membranes out of what you feed your body. And traditionally, meaning for thousands of years, however long we want to measure time, these things have been built almost entirely off of whole grain lipids. The other thing about that membrane, though, is it's not just a barrier. It's not just a wall between what's inside and outside. It is a transport system. It means it has to keep out what it doesn't want, but it has to import what it does want. After all, it's alive, so it has to import energy. And if it has a role to fulfill in your body, it has to be able to fulfill that role. So as an example, I want you all to become pancreas cells for a moment. Okay, you're all pancreas cells. Okay, and your job is to produce insulin. Okay, everybody feel comfortable as a pancreas cell now? Okay, your job is to produce insulin. So now here I am, I've got this property, this membrane between what's outside and what's inside. But now I need to selectively import the amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals, and other compounds that are needed to make insulin. Plus I need to bring in some energy because that production is going to cost me some energy. So I need to import those things. Again, keeping out what I don't want, keeping in what I do want. And then I need to manufacture that insulin. Then I need to export that insulin while keeping in what I need and keeping out what I don't want. And get rid of the waste products of that metabolism of doing that job. So that membrane is not just a membrane. It's not just a fence around the world, right? It is a very active portion of the cell. And how well that membrane works determines how well that cell works. If those things don't move in and out of that cell efficiently, then that cell isn't going to work efficiently. If 75 trillion of your cells, or even a significant portion of those, are not working efficiently, guess what? You're not going to feel very efficient and energetic. The actual production of energy that goes on in your cells occurs through that membrane process. Okay, so it looks sort of like that. When cells are healthy, things get in real quick, the one on the right, and things get out efficiently. That cell is healthy and vigorous. When that membrane is not functioning efficiently, things don't get in efficiently, things don't get out efficiently, and that cell is just not considered healthy. So we developed this product called treonine grain concentrate. Actually, it was discovered way back in the 1950s by a group of researchers here in Southern California at Presbyterian Hospital, who were investigating this explosion of chronic disease that was occurring in the population. Prior to World War II, chronic disease was known, but really didn't exist. It wasn't a common occurrence.
Chronic fatigue.
No.
Or chronic fatigue,
Disease.
yes, excuse me. Did I say disease?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Chronic fatigue, okay. prior to World War II, chronic fatigue didn't really show up in the population. It was known, but didn't show up very often. But after we moved in and started to suburbanize and industrialize our lifestyles, chronic fatigue became a big problem in the medical community, to the point where these researchers wanted to investigate what the cause was. Why this big explosion? Why were there, 1,000% more people with this problem than there were just a few years ago? What they decided is that it might have multiple causes, and one of those they felt might be due to dietary changes. When they looked at how people had changed their diet so dramatically prior to World War II and after World War II, they thought there was a connection there. To make a long story short, they looked at what was going on with whole grain and went back and got the whole grains, the things that were being stripped out of the whole grains, things that were no longer in flour, no longer in bread, no longer in whole grain cereals, and gave those back to their population. And for a big portion of the chronic fatigue suffering patient body, the chronic fatigue went away. And this was 1950s. They weren't really sure why, but they speculated at the time that it looked like these things had some influence over how well our cells produce energy, which today we know is true. At the time we didn't understand the relationships, but today we know that those nutrients are critical to the barrier properties and the transport properties of cell membranes, and their presence or absence will influence how well your cells get that job done. Some years later, here in the 1980s, we went out to test this theory. We approached a number of universities and said, here's the theory. The presence or absence of these whole grain lipids and sterols, these whole grain nutrients in the diet, influences cell membrane function. If you wanted to test and prove that, what would you do? So they came back to us with a few protocols. We settled on the one presented by Texas A&M University. And Texas A&M said, well, let's just do a feeding study. We'll just do a feeding study and we'll see how this works. So they did a feeding study. And what they found was, you can read about this in more depth in our website if you want, but what they found was that those three situations there, the orange bar is when treonine was absent, when corn oil was used, which is a lipid, when corn oil was used as an oil source, but it could be safflower or any one of the typical more industrial oils, as compared to treonine grain concentrate. And they found that when treonine was present in the diet, overall growth and development was improved. In other words, they saw a difference in how fully the system developed. They also saw, that's on the left side, on the right side, they also saw an improvement in cardiovascular development, which would not be a surprise. If you're going to have an improvement in overall growth and development, we would expect the cardiovascular system to develop more efficiently as well. But finally, in the middle there, they showed that when treonine grain concentrate was present in the diet, nutrient utilization efficiency was improved. What they did is, because they were measuring the amount of food that was consumed compared to the growth, they could see that when treonine was present, those nutrients were used more efficiently, which substantiated the fact that treonine influences how cell membranes work, because nutrients are only used in your cells. They're not used anyplace else. So they cross into the cell, and in order for that to be facilitated, that cell membrane has to be functional, and when treonine was present, that was improved. Here's the next product in the package. It's called carotenoid complex. This product is made entirely from carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots. And they fulfill the colorful fruits and vegetables component of the guidelines from World Health and CDC and USDA and so on and so forth. These things are critical because they play a number of roles. First of all, they are protector nutrients. When we consume them, they offer us protection. They are antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. So they contribute to protecting us from the forces of oxidation and inflammation, which are the drivers of all disease. Okay? They're called the evil twins of aging and disease because oxidation and inflammation accelerate the aging process and contribute to our risk of disease, increase our risk of disease. Okay? Very important. They are known to protect your heart. I'll give you a little background. When we started developing this product back in 1980s, something like this didn't exist, because what we wanted to do was take very bioactive whole food components of carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, etc., those 7 I told you about. We wanted to extract them, put them into a gelatin capsule, then deliver that capsule to people, have them consume them, and then have them show up in the bloodstream and do the things that they would do if you consume them from carrots or some other source. Okay? Just wanted them to be like food. When we were doing this study, we were pioneering a lot of investigation because some of the markers of identity didn't exist. There's 15 carotenoids in our product, and at the time, only 5 or 6 had been identified. We knew they were there because we could see the peaks and the signatures on the analytical equipment, but we just weren't sure what they were. So we went around the world to Germany and throughout the United States and Japan even, finding people to help us identify those peaks, which we did. In the process, we got a lot of people knowing what we were up to because this had never been done before. We got an invitation from the New York Academy of Sciences to present our work. We published that bioavailability study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They invited us to present our work at that meeting. It was called Carotenoids in Human Health, which we did. And in the audience that day, there were 3 researchers from the U.S. Department of Agriculture from their Beltsville, Maryland, the Human Nutrition Research Center in Beltsville and the Human Nutrition Research Center at the Presidio in San Francisco. They approached us after and said that they would like to do some work with our product, with this carotenoid complex. The reason they were interested in it is, 1, it had never been done before, and 2, they are all about food. It's the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and all of these things are agricultural products. So they wanted to investigate how that would work. They set out, once we said yes, they set out and they did 4 things for us. 1, they reaffirmed bioavailability, which we had done, meaning that it gets into your bloodstream. When it was in your bloodstream, they showed that the carotenoids actually are transported around on your LDL cholesterol molecule, and by doing that, in taking that ride, they pay for that by protecting that cholesterol molecule from oxidation, which is important because the oxidation of LDL cholesterol is one of the primary mechanisms of atherosclerotic, with or without them. If you don't have them, then your immune system is going to be compromised. If you have an abundance, then your immune system is going to be maximized. So it's been known for a while, shown in humans and monkeys and dogs and everything that has cells like that. So anyway, what they did is they got a group of people, crazy people, and they brought them into a clinical metabolic unit. They called them crazy people because they signed in for 120 days. They don't get to go anywhere from 120 days, and everything they eat and drank and everything they did was monitored by the full faith and strength of the United States Department of Agriculture. Okay, and they were interested in everything you did. Okay. So anyway, they put them in there. They took baseline samples and put them on a carotenoid-depleted diet. For 60 days, they just took them away. And as they watched them, they could see the markers of immunity falling. In particular, the ones they were interested in was called lymphocyte proliferative responsiveness. Lymphocytes are your immune warriors. Proliferative responsiveness means how many you can produce and how quickly. So if something enters you and you're under attack, you want your immune system there like that, right? That's lymphocyte proliferative responsiveness. The other marker they looked at was natural killer cells. That's a particular type of lymphocyte that is your first line of defense against things like cancer. Okay? If a cancer occurs in your body and your immune system is aware of it, it will be the natural killer cell that will go out and shoot and kill the cancer. Okay. So anyway, they put them in there. At the end of 60 days, they took a look at it and said they dropped quite a lot, like 20%. So then they tried to give them synthetic beta-carotene for another 40 days, and that didn't work. So at day 100, they had lost like on average, 27% of their immune capacity, which is important to note because that's probably how most of people that you'll encounter in the world are going around with a dramatically reduced immune potential. From day 101 to day 120, they did nothing else except give them 3 carotenoid complex capsules a day. And at the end of that period of time, not only did they recover the 27% of their immune capacity that they'd lost, that they were fully 10% above baseline on average. So in just 20 days of supplementation with our product, they undid 100 days worth of depletion and ended up at higher than baseline, excuse me, higher than they came in. And the trend line for the continued growth and strengthening of their immune system was going upward. You never really know what the potential of your immune system is because all of us operate at something less than its full potential. But the reality is that most Americans out here these days are probably running around with maybe 30 to 40% of their immune potential being realized, and the other 60 or 70% of their immune potential being compromised because nutrients modulate immunity, and the absence of nutrients is going to cause that reduction of immune capacity. Anyway, they went around. This was done by the USDA and CDC researchers using our product. That was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, as well as presented at several big scientific meetings around the world. Only product of its kind in the world. I'm going to tell you about this little gold capsule, Salmon Oil Plus. Omega-3 fatty acids are critical. Remember I told you that there's anti-inflammatory and inflammatory forces in your body. Okay? And generally, the relationship between those two is what creates what we would call a healthy homeostasis, a healthy body state. Okay? In the biochemistry, when we look back over time, as far back as you want to look, and look at biochemistry, there should be a relationship of about 1 anti-inflammatory component for every 3 inflammatory components. And however, what's happened today is for every 1 anti-inflammatory, we've got 20 to 40 inflammatories. That's because the inflammatory fats and the inflammatory components come out of the industrial food supply. Everything sold at a fast food restaurant is inflammatory. Even if you go to Long John Silver's and get the deep fried fish. Because of the deep frying part. But everything in there is anti-inflammatory. So I want you to think of, or inflammatory, rather. I want you to think about that for a moment. This critical relationship in our biochemistry between inflammation and anti-inflammation. Finding the solution in the food supply for most people is difficult because they don't know where to go to get it. And you can't really believe what you read on labels in a lot of these foods. So it becomes a really, really big problem. And for years, we've been investigating this in the Scientific Advisory Board. And the example I like to give as to how this works is everyone in the room right now has got a steady body temperature, right? Give or take 98.6 in Fahrenheit. It's all stable. And, you know, even though things go up and down in the room, that stays pretty stable. In this particular instance, that's because there's something inside, an inflammatory force heating you up and another one cooling you down. And it's the relationship between those two things that can create that steady state. That is true throughout your biochemistry. It's the relationship between anti-inflammatory and inflammatory fats. But what we find is that in this country, and pretty much the Western world, and now places like China that have adopted our diet, we live in this chronic inflammatory state. Okay, because our diets are imbalanced and really biased towards inflammation, our biochemistry has no choice but to live in an inflammatory state. And that accelerates our risk of, amplifies our risk of disease and accelerates the aging process. Now, omega-3s are the primary anti-inflammatory that appears in the human diet. Okay, there are a few others. Carotenoids play some anti-inflammatory roles, as do some other compounds called polyphenols. But from a metabolic point, this is the big player, the big booster. Salmon oil, we chose that years ago because it's pure and natural and rich, and it has the greatest biological affinity to the human body, meaning that it matches the body's need for omega-3s better than any other source out there. So we use that as the primary building block. Omega-3s are critical because they promote heart health. Remember, the American Heart Association wants you to have salmon for breakfast, salmon for dinner. Okay, that's the American Heart Association. They probably have stock in some salmon fisheries. It promotes youthful brain function from the day you were born throughout your entire life. The availability or the presence of these things influence cognitive function. Healthy, flexible joints. If you don't have these sorts of things, you can get stiff joints, unnecessarily stiff and painful joints. Conversely, if you consume a lot, those will go away. Healthy eyes, vision is dependent upon this. And fetal eye and brain development. I mentioned earlier about mothers not having enough omega-3s and how that impacts laying down the brain and central nervous system of the fetus. So fetal eye and brain development is critical. There are 8 omega-3 fatty acids involved in human nutrition. We're the only company that sells a standardized product that is made entirely from fish that delivers all 8 omega-3 fatty acids involved in human nutrition. You can see them on the label. We call them out. We tell you how much is there. Okay. We're very diligent about where we get our fish supplies because fish have a habit of turning up without passports. So you don't know where they've been. You don't know where they've come from. So we need to be very sure. So what we do is we go to great lengths to make sure we go to pristine areas. So most of our fish we get out of Norway, very much in the very northern regions of the Arctic Ocean, because the water there is of greatest purity. But even so, even though we know that, every time we get the stuff, we check for 200 potential contaminants. Those will be the things that run off of all of the continents now, you know, the agricultural, industrial, chemicals that just sort of run off into the oceans, and many, many things more. And we have what we call the zero tolerance for detection levels. There is established levels of detection, meaning that you can't detect any more below that. Whatever that level is, if anything shows as any amount is detected, then the batch is rejected.
Can I have a question, just because you're on that omega-3? Flax oil is supposed to also contain, but it doesn't contain 8 then? Is that
Right, flax contains just 1.
Okay. So it's good, but it's just
Yeah, flax, nothing wrong with
as
flax.
good
But, well, here,
as-
I'll tell you what. Take a little bit of biochemistry. Flax contains alpha-linolenic acid, and alpha-linolenic acid alpha-linolenic acid is the first molecule in the omega-3 fatty acid chain. So it goes from ALA to stearidonic acid up through icosapentaenoic, tetranoic, pentanoic, and stuff you don't need to worry about. But there's 8 of them. Basically, in the plant community, that's the only omega-3 the plant community makes. In human food chain, when you look at where our omega-3s come from food sources, at the interface between phytoplankton, plant-based sea vegetation, and zooplankton, the things that they eat out in the oceans there that are the animals, zoo is animals, that interface, below the phyto level, it's only ALA, that's passed into the animal level, to the zoo level, and then the animals, only animals have the ability to make the others, okay, to make the other 8. And because salmon and things like that end up pretty far up the food supply, they collect a lot of those building blocks and end up with a very rich source of those compounds. The problem if there's a problem with flax, it's that we know that our ability to, what they call elongate the molecules, these are long-chain fatty acids, our ability to elongate the molecules is quite compromised. It doesn't happen very efficiently in our bodies. It can work pretty well. The body will make use of what you give it. But when we look at the overcoming the vast imbalances between anti-inflammatory and inflammatory fats, it's not really very good.
not as effective, obviously.
Not as effective. It's good for you, but not for these particular reasons.
Yeah. And anti-inflammatory, can you explain kind of like, because inflammation, you're saying we want to break down the inflammation, so.
Yeah, I got a long ways to go here.
Yeah, okay, sorry,
I
was gonna say, it's just very interesting about the whole, because that's.
Oh, it is.
It's such a huge thing, and everybody's recognizing it's the start of a lot of diseases.
It is the foundation of most diseases.
Yeah.
See what it says right there? Chronic inflammation leads to chronic disease.
Yeah.
Oxidation and inflammation are the evil twins of aging and disease. Those two things are the big drivers. But let me finish here, and then we can talk about, if you guys want to hang around for a while and do Q&A, we can do that. So just jot them down. Anyway, we like doing clinical trials, so when we put this product together finally with all 8, we ran out and did a clinical trial. We like to show that these things actually work. The study we did was called an intervention trial. That's where we go to a population of healthy people. You have to qualify as being healthy, quote unquote healthy. And then we ask them to do nothing but take 3 of our salmon oil plus capsules a day. That's all, because that's exactly the way the product is going to enter the marketplace. So we wanted to see how it's going to work in real life. The first thing we did is a bioavailability study, and we showed that when you take salmon oil plus, it gets into your bloodstream very quickly, very quickly. We also showed that it was utilized very quickly. Immediately, within the first few days, we could see that it was displacing inflammatory fats from red blood cell membranes and replacing them with anti-inflammatory fats again. And cell membrane inflammation is a big part of the disease process. Okay. We showed that they were cardioprotective. If you had high triglycerides when you entered the study, it lowered your triglycerides. people came in with triglycerides up around 300-400. They got normalized down into the 100-150 range very quickly. However, if you didn't have a triglyceride problem, it did nothing. It's not like a drug. It only normalizes things. It only brings you back to normal health. If you had low triglycerides and you took the typical triglyceride lowering drug, it would actually force your triglycerides down further and create a disease or condition called hypotriglyceridemia. You can actually suffer from too little triglycerides. Okay. What Salmon Oil Plus did, though, was just those people who needed it got the benefit, and those people who didn't, nothing happened, because it's not a drug-like response. It's strictly a nutritional response. And we showed also that it improved the ratio between LDL and HDL cholesterol, pumping up HDL levels, lowering LDL levels, improving the ratio between HDL and total cholesterol. So all of those things are cardioprotective. And then we showed that it balances inflammation. This is really important. This is going to play back to your inflammatory thing here. Next time you all go to your doctor, whenever that is, if you need to go or if you want to go, I want you all to ask them about what your inflammatory index is. You should say, "Doctor, what's my inflammatory index?" So your inflammatory index is a series of biomarkers that the medical community should be using if they're not, and many of them are starting to now, particularly in cardiology. And your inflammatory index is a series of biomarkers that determine where you are on this scale of inflammation. The scale was developed from looking at many, many studies over a period of decades and then equating those sorts of markers of risk of inflammation and risk of disease to this scale. The scale starts at 0, which you don't want to be because you'll be dead, because you have to have some inflammation, okay? And ends at 15, where you don't want to be there either, because that's spontaneous combustion. Okay, so in the middle here is where you want to be. And generally, you want to be down around 5 or lower on this scale of 0 to 15. When people entered this study, we took these biomarkers for their inflammatory index, and we determined that many of them were up in the 7 to 8 range, which meant they were moderately to significantly inflamed. Chronic inflammation was a moderate to significant force in their biochemistry. Therefore, their probability of disease in the future was much higher than it needed to be. Okay. But at the end of the study, just 8 weeks, on average, we were able to reduce their inflammatory index by 68%, moving people who were moderately to significantly at risk to being in an area where they were significantly not at risk, way down the scale in terms of anti-inflammatory properties. That's really important because, as it says there, chronic inflammation leads to chronic disease, and the foods we consume push us towards chronic inflammation. That, coupled up with the foods we're not consuming, which are the anti-inflammatory components, actually amplify the problem. And finally here, this little green tablet, that's a multivitamin mineral product. It's got a few other things in it, like some digestive enzymes to help with digestion and the like. The reason we put that in there is because essential vitamins and minerals are still essential. And we wanted to make this a complete program to start people off with. Okay, it's a very, very powerful product. It's also rich in nutrients. At the end of this is, I like to stop and make a point here. These things are food supplements, not food substitutes. So everything that they're made from, we want you to eat. Okay, carrots, tomatoes, spinach, whole grains, omega-3 rich fish. That should be the thing that occupies the biggest portion of your plate, not the burgers and fries, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the month, if you take a month of these things, in terms of nutritional equivalents, you will have got the lipid and sterol nutritional equivalents of 35 pounds of the whole grains this product's made from, wheat, rice, and soy. 35 pounds. You will have gotten the nutritional equivalent of 80 pounds of the carrots, tomatoes, spinach, red bell peppers, peaches, strawberries, and apricots that the product is made from. And you will have gotten the equivalent of 10 5-ounce servings of salmon. Okay. So, again, we want you to eat those things, but when you equate that back to nutritional value, because these are foods, they're just in alternative forms, okay, you see how powerful the product is in terms of its delivery. It's not just delivering a little something, it's delivering something very powerful, and all that in one 30-day supply. And there's no better way to start your day than this. This is a different presentation. I'd just like to point this out. Every morning when you wake up, what do? You break fast, right? Because you've been fasting. Hopefully since you went to sleep that night, you haven't been eating. If you've been eating in your sleep, you go see somebody about it. It happens. sleepwalkers often walk to the refrigerator. That's their excuse. Oh, I wasn't really going to have that. I must have been sleepwalking. Anyway, but when you wake up in the morning, when you break fast, not only are you in need of nutrients, that's the most important time of the day, but you are in what we call nitrogen deficit. Nitrogen is a compound that is found and calculated in the protein content of your diet, and while you've been asleep, your body has been madly using amino acids to repair all the mess you made during the day and take care of redoing and regenerating and all of that funk running the immune system and trying to figure out what to do with that burger you ate for dinner. And so we all wake up in what we call nitrogen debt, which is an amino acid debt. So the first thing you should do in the morning is make sure your body has a fresh supply of amino acids. They're the fundamental building blocks of everything that goes on, your brain chemistry, your cardiovascular chemistry, the autonomic system of your body, everything. So very important, but that's a different presentation. Now what I want to do is I want to talk to you a little bit about what the Neolife difference. It's great that we know all this stuff about all of these raw materials and the nutrients and how they work in your biochemistry, but if you don't commit yourself to getting the raw materials in a specific manner, you won't necessarily be able to deliver the benefit every time. So I'm going to do a little session called Farm to Table. It won't take very long. The idea is how we go about collecting our stuff. Collecting our ingredients. Every ingredient we buy, every ingredient we use goes through this process. Everything that goes into every Neolife product goes through stringent quality requirements. Every supplier of every ingredient must qualify to send us something. And then even though they have qualified the first time, they have to qualify every time they send us something. So it's a constant state of qualifying and requalifying. If you're growing carrots and you get the attention of our raw material supply team and they go out to your carrot crop area and they actually go visit these places, then look at that and decide that, okay, this is good, you can send us carrots. They send us the carrots and all the information about the carrots. It goes into the system and then we say, okay, good, we'll take those carrots. The next time you send them, whether it's the next week or the next month or the next season, you have to requalify. You have to go through that whole qualification process again, simply because just because you did it once doesn't mean you can do it every time. So we have a trust but verify program. So let's take a look at what happens when we go out there. When we select places for raw materials to come from, I'll use carrots as an example. People from our supply group actually go out into those areas and look and see what's going on. They want to see the crops, they want to see the soil, they want to see what's around. If there's GMO crops being raised upwind, that would be a bad thing, right? Okay? Because pollen travels, right? If there happens to be a Monsanto facility making glyphosate, that's Roundup upstream, we don't want. After it meets that criteria, then as it's shipped into general distribution, when it goes into our distribution centers, our warehouses and so on, it goes through another quality control membrane, and once it's released, then it's shipped to the sales field from the farm to your table, right? All of this information on the sides of a bottle or the bottom of boxes, you'll find a batch code, and that batch code is a complete history of that product. Even though it's only a few digits long, if I were to enter that into the computer in the laboratory, it would tell me everything about that particular batch. It would say this batch of carotenoid complex was made on this day by this crew at this time on this machine. It was checked by this quality control, and signed off. And then if I checked on the raw material up here, it would say the raw materials were these carrots and these spinach and this, and if I checked on the carrots, it would take me all the way back to the field and the genetic stock that carrot is made from. All of that is visible through that window, and we track it all the way from, literally from the farm to the table. The reason we do that is because we like to do quality that way. The other reason is it's much more of a complex task that we have, a much more important task than we have than just being a pharmaceutical industry. If you're selling a pharmaceutical, somebody takes an aspirin, they get their pain relief and the aspirin goes away. When you take our products, they go into your body, they're absorbed into your body, they become part of your body. They take up residence in cell membranes or become membrane structures themselves or become the building blocks of that. And because they're there, we have this very, very strict sort of guidelines for quality control that says if you're going to give somebody something that's going to become part of their, not only part of their health, but part of themselves, their biochemistry, you need to be very sure. And I give these things to my father and my father-in-law, mother-in-law, wife and I take them, the kids take them, the grandkids take them. So we're pretty sure what's going on there. But here's a way to summarize this. Because of this level we go to, it says here, NEOLI products meet or exceed the quality standards for purity, potency, and consistency of every major regulatory authority in the world. We sell all of these products I just told you about all over the world, 55 different countries. When we produce the information, we can do this because we've got so much information when we go to the Japanese and say, what do you need? And show them what we've got. They say, we'll take some of this, but you'll need that. But they'll take that and we get an approval. Because we're already doing more, producing more quality evidence, if you will, or quality data on the product than the Japanese or the Australians or the Europeans or the Africans or the Mexicans or Americans or Canadians require, to the point where our data already exceeds everything that they have for quality requirements. So, a couple of things to point out here. You've heard me talking a lot about food, in particular human food. We like to do things not just natural, but human natural, because we think human natural is appropriate for humans, somehow. There's some things that are natural, you know, there's cows eat stuff that's completely natural, but because they're ruminators, if we were to eat that, we would have trouble. Okay, they just digest things differently. So there's the cow natural diet and there's a human natural diet. So we found that the reason we do that is when we pay a lot of attention to nature, and we are part of nature. We tend to think of ourselves as somehow being separate from it. You know, there's me and then there's nature out there. No, you're part of nature. And we pay a lot of attention to nature because we are nature. Okay. And then we back that up with a lot of science. I referred to a lot of clinical trials, some we've done, some third parties have done. We have a lot of third-party evidence, you know, USDA, CDC, others who have done work on our products and proven that they work. So it's not just us saying these things work, but major governmental and regulatory and academic authorities. Okay. And finally, remember what we started out with here. We started out looking at the problem. We have this epidemic of chronic disease, right? It's nationwide, worldwide. It's not going to get any better. The trend lines are saying that it's only going to get worse. So we know what's absent. We know what's driving it. It's the absence of, according to the World Health Organization and everybody else, it's the absence of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, and fish. Because those foods contain bioactive substances that are fundamental to our bodies. Their absence or presence will determine how well our bodies are going to work. Simple. Okay. This product is based on that knowledge. It's identifying those active, bioactive ingredients from those exact food supplies and bringing it to you in a way that allows you to add those things to your diet every day. And by doing that and making conscious decisions about what's going on, only then can we end the trend. The trend-ending ideal for chronic disease has got to be grassroots. It's got to start down here at the average person's level. They can never be dictated from the top down by government. You know, the nutrient police will come around and inspect your dinner plates if you're not careful. No, it won't happen. That's science fiction. But the reality is, if it's going to get done, it's going to get done by us, and that's part of the message here that we're trying to deliver. Everybody needs to take some responsibility for themselves and then share this information with others, and only then will we end the trend and solve the problem. Thank you very much.